If you are tired of paying for those high priced green tractors and not getting the service that you think you deserve, run over and see our friends Scott and Lance Sage at the Hobby Tractor Store. They sell these amazing quality brands.
They sell great brands like LS, TYM, Branson, Bad Boys, and other quality brands at a much better price with twice the service.
They have the hometown feel the minute you walk through their doors. Go see them at one of their 2 locations in Pleasant Grove or Roosevelt. Let them know that your friends Scott and Hillary from Surviving Life's Pickles sent you in. Welcome back to Surviving Life's Pickles. I'm Scott Martin.
And I'm Hillary. We're happy to be back with you today.
You know what? We just wanted to start this next episode. But before we do that, I just wanted to jump on here and say how grateful I am, how grateful we are for what has happened in the last week. After we started this Numb series, talking about the vulnerability of men, talking about the experiences with Frankie as he went through life, and me sharing a little bit of mine as well, we have had so many people reach out. So many people thank us. So many people say, hey, we appreciate what you're doing. How do I get in touch with the I Love You Bro project? Hey, your story resonated with me. All these things have just hit me emotionally so deep. This is the reason that we started this.
It is.
And this is the reason that we're going to continue doing this, is because of the impact that we feel that is happening with our community. It has just been amazing. It has been overwhelming emotionally and physically in such a good way. Like, I am just so grateful that the people who have needed to hear these stories have been tuning in.
I am just so grateful for you, Scott. Words cannot express how proud I am of you and all of the amazing things that you are doing and letting men know out there that they can be vulnerable too and that they're not alone. It's such a huge thing that you are doing, sharing your story and reaching out to people. And I want you to know just how grateful and proud I am of you.
Thank you. And I couldn't do it without the support of you and the willingness to let me be vulnerable, let me air my dirty laundry and my clean laundry on air for everybody to hear.
It's a little nerve-wracking, but you've done well.
And so that brings us to Numb Series episode 2 and 3. What's going to come on with this one is this is very personal.
Because it's you.
This is going to be my story. And over the next episodes, you're going to hear about my childhood. You're going to hear about a lot of the speed bumps. You're going to hear about the trips and the falls and the completely falling into these black holes in my life. But more importantly, I'm so excited to share with you how I've climbed out of those holes.
Mm-hmm. And the people that helped you.
And how I've picked up myself and the people around me that have rallied when I needed them. And all of these wonderful, amazing things that have happened because of these speed bumps, because of these trials, that have really turned me into the person I am today. I am so thankful and eternally, eternally grateful for these experiences that I'm going to share with you, because I would not be sitting here today with you. I would not be the person I am today without all of these experiences that I have had to go through. It's like the old Michelangelo term that they say, you know what? You chip away at the stone until you find the beautiful piece of art underneath. And that's what I feel like I've been doing for the last 44 years. I just dated myself.
It's okay.
But I'm hoping that, again, these stories resonate with you. I'm hoping that by sharing this, I can open some men up who have been nervous, some men who have felt like they're alone in what they're going through. Because guess what, guys? You're not alone. We've all been through our trials, and we all We just plow through them. And once we plow through these trials, we become better men, we become a stronger men. And it's just amazing what happens once you allow yourself to experience it, express it, and vocalize it. I can't express it enough of how much vocalizing the things that you have gone through makes a difference in your mental health.
Another great thing is because you were sharing with two therapists, it's a great insight into what therapy is like and showing people that it's not scary, it's not cuckoo, it's not, woohoo, whatever. I've heard so many people that are against therapy but have never even experienced it. And this gives them a good insight into kind of looking into what a therapy session could be, but also just allowing them to ask for help. That's another thing that I'm so proud of you is you did ask for help. And we don't have to go through life alone. We're not meant to go through life alone, and we need to ask for help when we need it.
And it's hard. It's extremely hard to take that jump and ask for the help.
It is.
But as Hillary said, these next episodes are truly a therapy session for me. I sat down with my current therapist, Emily, at Koru Wellness, and we had a very nice discussion and dove into my childhood, my teenage years, and kind of the early part of my adult life. Then I switched the tables, and I have a very good friend of mine that is also a therapist. He works for the VA. He also works in the recovery world. An extremely amazing man who sat with me, and we were able to discuss and dive into some of these deeper issues, some of these things that have really shaped my life into what it is today. And I'm so thankful that he was willing to sit down and do that with me. So guys, as you listen to this, if you've never been to therapy, this is a therapy session. This is how it goes. It really is that easy. Remember, I've said this before. I will continue to preach this. Therapy is nothing other than you having a conversation with yourself, with somebody else there to guide you in the direction you need to. They're there to listen. They're there to give you insight,
Suggestions.
They are not there to judge you. They are not there to belittle you. They are not there to do anything other than to help you on the journey of as you talk to yourself and become one with all those parts inside you so that now you can evolve out of that therapy session into a better person. So again, thank you for being willing to listen to this. I hope this helps. And here is my story.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to our next episode of Surviving Life's Pickles. I'm Scott Martin, your host, and today I'm joined with Emily Krupa. Thank you for coming in today, Emily.
Of course. Happy to be here.
And as everybody can see, if you're seeing the video, we are in a little bit of a different location today. We are actually recording from Emily's therapy office here at Koru Wellness. So, a little bit change of scenery. So this is different. This is nice.
Yeah. All brand new. So
before we get into the episode today, we're going to start it just like we ever do. And I'm going to throw Emily on the spot and ask her what she's grateful for today.
Oh, man. I mean, I have so much to be grateful for at this, position in my life. Something that comes to mind sort of right away is just my husband. We have been married for, man, that's a little bit more of an on-the-spot question of how we're even married. Maybe 15 years? 2011? Yeah, so 15 years, I think. And we've been through a lot, in that time. Most recently going through, my own journey with cancer and him having to work many jobs and take care of me and take care of our children. And just, we're kind of on the other side of that. But he does a lot. He does a lot for our family and for me. And he is just, if you watch Friends, he's my lobster.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's my lobster.
Yeah.
So.
Everybody has that lobster.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, well, for myself today, as I was coming here, I have to admit, This is probably the most nervous out of any interview that I've done so far. And everybody will find out why in here in just a few seconds. But I really am grateful for the courage that I have found doing this journey with the podcast and meeting people. A year ago, I would have absolutely not been here today doing this with you. And being able to find that courage and pass it on and show my kids that courage is not just being brave, running inside a building, saving somebody from a fire, or, helping somebody at an accident, but being brave is really opening up, being vulnerable and authentic with yourself and with everybody else, and sharing hard things and talking about hard things. That really has opened up a whole new thing of courage for me. And so I'm really grateful that I've been able to find that and tap into that. So that's what I'm grateful for today.
Nice.
So, well, as we get into this, so this is our first episode in what we are doing here, the Numb series on the show. And the Numb series is really focused on men's mental health and a few men's journeys, from childhood to currently, and how mental health and, their, I guess, vision or perception of what a man is supposed to be and what a man should do as far as, in society, and then sharing your emotions and that sort of thing. And so today we're going to turn the tables, and this is the reason that I really struggled and had a hard time actually on my way here. I wanted to call him late, I think 3 times until I want to do this. So we're going to turn the tables today, and I am actually not doing the interview today. I'm going to be the interviewee. And Emily has been my therapist and helped me through so many things over this last year that I felt it very fitting and very personal to ask her to do this with me. One, because she's seen a lot of the stuff that I've had to go through and can really help possibly pull some of that extra stuff out that maybe I don't want to share, because she knows some of that. And so that's why I felt it very important to do this. And then realistic, everybody, this is just me in a therapy session with Emily, recording and sharing it with you. So thank you for being brave enough to listen with me, but thank you for taking the time, and we'll just kind of dive into it. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and we're going to see where this goes for everybody.
Awesome. I'm so excited, and grateful for you to be willing to do this, right? I think something that's really interesting about being a therapist is when we go to grad school, and even, after we get licensed, we have to get continuing education, and there's all these classes that we have to take on ethics and confidentiality. And it's very much sort of beaten into our brains, right, of this confidentiality piece and protecting people's confidentiality and not talking about things that we talk about in the therapy room in the real world. And there's a part of that I really love and respect, and I will always, above all, protect people's confidentiality, because there are things that need to be kept confidential in the therapy room, but there is also so much of people's stories and so much of people's experience that when shared, right, there's that saying of, share your story because oh man, I'm going to butcher it now. Something about like your, roadmap is going to be someone else's map.
Yeah.
Again, I'm butchering it. But I think it's so, beautiful and wonderful when we have these opportunities to share some of, this isn't going to be an exact therapy session because we have known each other, but to share some of like what that looks like, what that looks like for someone to go into therapy and tell their story a little bit, right? I do know your story, but today, for the sake of the interview, I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything, right? So that we can be curious and get to know who Scott is, right? Get to know you even on a deeper level than maybe we did. It's been a year. Yeah.
Coming up on a year marks.
Yeah. So let's, as we do, let's start from the beginning. What was the beginning? What was early life for you? What was childhood like? Where were you? Who were you raised? Who were you with? What's that early picture look like?
Well, for me, childhood was not normal from what most people experience as childhood. My dad was in the military. He joined shortly after I was born. And so we moved every 2 to 3 years up until the time I was 11, 12 is when we finally settled down. And then we still moved every couple of years, but we were actually a little more localized. So my early childhood, I mean, there's not a lot I have as far as memories, not a lot I have that I can dive into because everything was changing. Everything was so fluid. My very first memories I have, we lived in a little town in New Mexico called Clovis at the air base there. And I had one little black friend and one other friend. And I don't remember their names. I just remember that those were the only two people in my life at that time. My dad was always working because of, he was new in the military. So he was pulling 10, 12-hour days, and mom was home. She was actually going to school. I can't remember if that's when she was working on her English stuff, or she was very big into creative writing with calligraphy and, artistic writing. So she was going to school with that too. So she was very busy as well. So, I mean, I just remember going around and, because they were so busy, I was one of those kids at that age who was very curious and started getting into trouble at a very young age. My funniest and I guess earliest memory I remember with that is, I want to say I was 4, possibly. I hadn't been 4 because my sister hadn't been born yet. So I'd been 4 years old. Me and my little next door neighbor friend had watched some show. I can't even tell you what it was. But we got the crazy idea that we wanted to roller skate. Yes, I said roller skate around the neighborhood with nothing on at all. All we did was we took some rolls of toilet paper and wrapped it around our waist, so we just covered our midsection. And so you can see these 2 kids that are 4 years old rollerblading down the street in nothing but wrapped in toilet paper. And again, by the time we got to the end of the street, there was no toilet paper there. And one of the neighbors caught us and brought us back home, and that was the first experience that I can remember of getting disciplined. And it's funny because I didn't remember a lot of this before, and I've actually kind of talked to my mom over the last little bit. I have little bits and pieces have been coming back, and she kind of filled this in. I remember the wooden spoon during this event, mom getting the wooden spoon out, and that thing was broke over my butt. And I remember that, and I was been stuck. That literally was the only thing I remember about the whole event, other than me being naked on roller skates. And later, like this year, she had explained to me, because I resented her for the wooden spoon. I just always had. And she explained to me this year that she did that to protect me. If she wouldn't have done that, then the consequences when my dad got home would have been worse. And so out of how she felt she could protect me and show, hey, I disciplined him, it's taken care of, you don't have to do anything, she spanked me with the wooden spoon, really that would be the end of it. Mm-hmm. There wouldn't be anything else. Mm-hmm. And again, I resented her up until this year for that event. Like I've held that against her until we sat down and had a conversation. She explained why that happened. So that was kind of the first discipline, my childhood. We didn't live there much longer. My sister was born about a year later. We're 5.5 years apart. And I do remember that when my sister was born, I was at the swimming pool with my friends. And one of the moms that come over that I was there with, because my mom and dad were in San Antonio because it was a very high risk. So they had actually fly my mom to San Antonio to the hospital there. Oh, wow. So that she actually survived. Like if they didn't, she probably wouldn't have made it through labor. Mm-hmm. But because of that, when my neighbor came over and said, hey, you have a baby sister, I looked up at her and I said, okay. And I remember that. And she's like, well, you need to get out and go. So we're going to, get you over so you can meet your baby sister. Your dad's on his way back from San Antonio to pick you up. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I'm swimming. I don't care. And she's like, no, you have to go. And so as soon as my dad got there, I remember looking at him and telling him, I don't want to go. And then I started bartering with him. I wanted to trade a gerbil for my sister. I'm like, I don't want her. Give me a gerbil. I wanted to trade her for my friend's pet. I was trying to trade my friend at the time. Like, give me your gerbil. I'll give you my sister. I don't want to leave. And so.
And you were 5.
I was 5.5.
Okay.
So I remember that. And again, I remember my dad getting very mad. This is your sister. This is your blood. She's part of your family. How dare you do that? We joke about that. Very funny. Still this day, our whole family. I tried to trade my sister for my friend's gerbil hamster.
I mean, you were 5.
I was
right?
5.
You were 5.
Yeah. But at the moment, like it very much upset my dad because mom almost died giving birth to her, and here I am joking about I want a rodent.
Right.
So I was always really kind of from that time on. I looked up to my dad. He was a very strong, but he was disciplined. He was military to me. Like our house was ran like a military branch. It was very structured, very disciplined, you don't get out of line. It was yes sir, yes ma'am. And pretty much until we moved to Utah when he retired from the full-time military, it was like that. And so I was I don't know if afraid is the right word, but I was very careful about what I did because I didn't know what the consequence would be. Like my mom had said, she did that to protect me, and she spanked me often when I got in trouble, just for the fact that she could say, I spanked him, it's taken care of, you don't have to worry about it.
And this was, what year were you born?
So I was born in 81.
Okay, so this was right around, mid 80s, where the wooden spoon was common.
Very. We actually talk about it in our I Love You Bro group. We had a whole night talking about her wooden spoons of experiences.
And I say that really intentionally. That was common, not normal.
Right.
There is a difference between something being normal and something being common. It was common, so we can have compassion for your mom was doing the best she could,
right, with what she knew,
because that was pretty common at the time.
Yeah. And again, in her eyes, it was saving me. It was protecting me from a very extreme beating, or just being very physically hurt. And it's no fault of my dad's all. I mean, he was raised in Idaho on a farm, and they were he is the youngest of 7, I believe. And on a farm, and my grandpa was a very tough man's man. If you want to take my knee, there was nothing that hurt that man. And he was very strong, and that's how he ran his house as well. And so it was all my dad knew.
Right.
That's how he was raised. And then he goes into the military, and they get even more disciplined. So that really changed. That's what he knew, and that's what he put on us, because he sees that is the best in the world. Right. You're part of the military. If you're structured, you have this, and so that's how we try to raise us. So that's kind of my childhood, that early years. We then moved to Miami, from Clovis, and we spent the rest of my childhood there until we moved to Utah. My dad went through 2 tours, while we lived there, to Desert Storm. Those were very stressful in the family. A lot of anxiety, a lot of crazy stuff happened. Knowing, I'm a 8-9-year-old boy, watching the TV of missiles flying into where my dad is and all this stuff is super, super stressful. And I just remember all the fear during that time.
Right.
At this time, again, we were in Miami. We did live on base at this time. We lived in the projects for a while when we got there because there was no other housing. I do remember the very first night we moved there, we went to the local Kmart. Kmarts were huge back then. And we were coming out of Kmart from buying some furniture, we bought a couch and some bean bags. I remember I had a blue bean bag. My sister had a pink one. And we were carrying them. And as we were walking out the store, we've been in Miami at least 2-3 days. My mom got mugged on the way out. Big black guy come running through the parking lot, knocked her down, stole her purse, and took off. And again, my dad took off trying to catch him. But that's one of my very first memories of moving to Miami. I'm like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Is we get mugged. Like my mom gets thrown to the ground and stuff stolen. Like I don't know what to think of it. I'm a little kid because I was between 6 and 7 at that time when we moved there.
Yeah. And coming from Clovis, New Mexico,
Like 500 people.
to Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
What a culture shock.
Yeah, huge. So it was our first experience. And then as we were there, I got enrolled in school. I was one of 4 or 5 white kids in the whole school. Because of where we lived. Like I said, we lived in the projects there for that first little bit. And so it was all very low income. A lot of Cubans, a lot of, blacks, a lot of Spanish speaking, just all sorts of different culture, just not white people. Mm-hmm. And it was I remember just being scared to go to school because, I was smaller than all these kids. Like, most of them are bigger. It's just in their genetics. And at that time, I was just a small, chubby kid. So I was scared to go to school. I was picked on, and it is a real thing. And I definitely have a little bit more compassion and views, as you heard people from other races talk about, being, persecuted or, kind of, how the word is, centered out, targeted. Right. I was that kid there for the first little bit because I was different.
Right.
So that was really, really hard for me. Because of that, I didn't make any friends. That first year we had there, I think by the end of the year, I made one little friend, little black kid, real skinny kid. Don't remember his name, but he was nice enough to kind of become my friend a little bit. He'd come over to the house just a couple of times after school. But really, that was it. I didn't have any friends. Not until we actually got approved to move on base housing, which again, is still not far from the projects, but now we're on the base. It's a little bit safer. We have the security around everything. But I did move schools again and had to start making new friends. Now that we were on base, though, we had more people that looked like me.
Right.
Because, there was a lot more white people, a lot more people from Europe, Germans, different things that were stationed there on base. So started to make a few friends at that time. We still had to walk to school. So going off base to school, we had to walk through like a under overpass, walk with the chain link fence with armed guards on both sides. And that's traumatic for a kid, going to elementary school and having to walk through a gate with armed guards on both sides. Just because, they were trying to protect us. They couldn't do a whole lot once we got to school, but they were making sure that all our trips to school were very, we were okay.
Right.
So I remember just always being scared as a kid and just not knowing what was going to happen. So that was that. And at this time, my dad is getting ready to be deployed. So he wasn't home. He was training, getting ready to be deployed for Desert Storm. So he was gone. It was just my mom. And so I looked up to him as the strong soldier. He was protecting the families, protecting the country. But nobody was protecting our house. Nobody was protecting us. So at that time, I remember my mom would laugh about this is my dad got deployed and I'd been watching a lot of MacGyver. So let me set that there. MacGyver was huge at this time. That was when MacGyver came out. I loved MacGyver and A-Team. Those were my shows because those guys were my heroes. They were protecting people. So I really bonded with them. So I made a home security system out of yarn, bells. If you've seen Home Alone, all the little trinkets that he made, you open the door and things fall on you. I literally did that because I didn't want anybody breaking in the house. What had happened is somebody actually broke in the house.
Oh, wow.
We were home, middle of the day, and a very large black man broke into our house and just started grabbing stuff. Wow. And we were literally there, and I came out and seen him. Just absolutely terrified me. Craziest thing is when he was done, he ran out, and we had a 6-foot chain link fence with the barbed wire on the top in our backyard because our house was on the border at the base. He jumped over that.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, how are we safe if that guy just went over that like it was nothing? Like,
Right.
very, very, very athletic guy. I mean, he literally like grabbed it, jumped over, and it was gone. I mean, I remember that very visually because I was just like, one, impressed, but one, scared to death because we can't protect ourselds from somebody like that. Like, he can get over a fence. He can do anything.
Right.
So really, my whole childhood until we moved to Utah, I lived in a lot of fear from the community, from my parents, you know, and just really didn't have a lot of friends. Like, I was so excited when we come here to Utah for Christmas because I got to hang out with my cousins. They were like me.
Right.
They understood me. They wanted to be my friend. My cousin Shelly, you know, even though our whole childhood we spent apart, we had a bond right from the first time we got together. And, you know, we have been very, very best friends since really the day we were born. We're only 5 months apart.
So you always had family in Utah?
Always. That's where my mom was from. My dad was from Idaho. And so, yeah, so all the family was really based here.
Right.
But with, you know, so I look forward to those times because my childhood, they say I was scared, traumatized. And there, I can be 100% honest when I say I don't have a lot of memories from that early stuff because I mean, my mind has blocked most of those things out.
Right.
Because it was a very traumatic time for me in my life. I mean, slowly, some of this has come out since we've started doing therapy and a few things we've been able to work through it. But, you know, going back to my cousin Shelly, she really has been my best friend since birth. She is literally the only person on this planet that knows everything about me. She's the person I can always go to. She's the person I trust when anything has gone wrong or anything has happened, good, bad, in the middle. She knows everything. Like, I think she knows me better than I know me. Because if I say something's going on, she pretty much can predict what's going to happen because she knows my behavior. And so I've always looked to her. She's really been my only true friend through life, period. Like, I don't have any other friends I can say like her. And I'm very thankful that we're family, but again, she really is my best friend. She actually married me and Hillary.
Oh, wow. That's so beautiful. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So she did, she married us, and that was super special to have her do that.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that's kind of my childhood. I mean, just a lot of fear, a lot of trauma that I honestly don't remember.
Right. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's interesting to kind of highlight with your dad's 2 deployments today in 2025, a deployment is still really challenging and obviously all the things on the family. But in 2025, if your loved one is on deployment, they have a cell phone. They can FaceTime you at any moment in time, anywhere on the world almost. You can have internet access and still be in pretty close contact. But in the late 80s, early 90s, that did not exist.
No, we were lucky to get maybe 6 to 7 phone calls the entire time he was gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is that heightened sense of fear. Like you're saying, you're watching things on TV, you're seeing things on the news of all of the horrible things that are happening during that time, and you have no contact with your father. Right.
Like I remember watching the Scud missile go through one of the buildings. Now, if anybody, you know, remembers any of that from watching that on TV, I remember watching that and knowing that my dad worked in that building, but not knowing for days if he was okay or if he was in there or what happened.
Right.
So just the fear.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then what brought you guys from Miami to Utah?
Hurricane Andrew.
Oh, okay.
So we were on base, living there when Hurricane Andrew came through, and the base is no longer there. Andrew wiped the entire thing right off the face of the earth. That was one of the biggest hurricanes for years that had hit South Miami.
Wow.
So they pretty much offered my dad, anywhere you want to go, pick it, you can go. We're going to relocate you, pay for it because you lost everything.
Right.
So that's how we ended up in Utah. And he decided at that time it was time. He moved here so he could retire from full time and just go into the reserves.
Right.
It was time.
Oh, okay.
He had enough.
Yeah.
So that's how we ended up back here in Utah.
Were you guys there during the hurricane?
Yeah, we were moving. It was coming in and we were grabbing stuff and going. Like, we had friends that stayed and, has videos of them in their house when it came through. Absolutely crazy. The funny fact about that is the Marlins baseball stadium that is now in South Florida, the parking lot is where my house used to be.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that's my name to fame. My house is in the parking lot where the
There you
Marlins
go.
is.
Yeah, your childhood home.
Yeah. So, but that's how we ended up in Utah. Brian ended up here, when I was around 11.
Okay.
Yeah, it was around 11 when we moved back.
So still so young.
Yeah.
You're moving a ton. You go from a town of 500 people to a time of, I don't know how many people lived in Miami during the middle 80s. Yeah, there are many, many, many people. And then experiencing a hurricane, and then you moved to what city in Utah did you move?
So we ended up moving to Provo.
Oh my gosh, the culture shock from, from Miami to Provo, Utah.
And we moved to Provo, and there were, it was the early 90s when everything was at a hype with BYU. Like, BYU was making their national, they were starting to make a name for themselves nationally. People were starting to know who BYU was as a school.
Right.
And we lived right in the middle of it. See, that 100% culture shock. Like, we went from driving 3 hours on the weekend to go to church on Sunday to walking 5 minutes.
Wow. And so you grew up in a Mormon family. Your family was LDS.
They were.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, neither parent served missions, any of that stuff. But yeah, we did grow up. I mean, that's how my mom and dad were raised. And, that's how I was raised, until handful of years when I decided that I wanted to explore different things.
Yeah.
But, so religion was part of it. I remember when living in Miami and different things, being young and having missionaries over. I thought it was really cool. Have missionaries over our house. We moved to Utah and the missionaries are on your doorstep every other day.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So yes, huge culture shock.
Yeah.
And that.
What was that? Because I think the LDS religion is so interesting, right? And I'm someone who grew up in Utah, but not of the LDS faith. My husband is someone who grew up in California of the LDS faith, and just the experience of being raised as a Mormon person in Utah and being raised as a Mormon person outside of Utah is always so unique. So what things stood out to you about your religion throughout your childhood? Was that, it sounds like part of it was positive because the missionaries would come over in Miami and you were like, these guys are cool and this is awesome. And what else stands out to you about that experience in your childhood? Positive, negative, all of the things.
For my early years until we moved back here, most of it was a very positive experience. That was where, like I said, we drove 3 hours to go to church. But then there was a lot more kids that were like me.
Right, at church.
Church, not at school.
Right.
Because the LDS faith at that time was very, very white. It was, not until the late 70s that the minority started joining. And so it was still not, very populated with a lot of the minorities. And so I got to go to church and be around a lot more kids my age, kids that looked like me. So it was almost a safe space.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I remember it being a safe space. I remember, definitely the good things. I got to do fun stuff with scouts and kids and things like that. I don't remember a lot of the activities, but I remember doing that.
Right.
And I just remember the missionaries coming over. I got to meet all these guys from all over the country and world. And I thought that was really cool because they were super nice.
Right.
And they just were genuinely there to make sure we were okay, to, help us with whatever we were struggling with. And I thought that was really great when I was a young kid because I looked up to them.
Mm-hmm.
They were great guys that were coming in our house. And now I look back, they were kids.
Yeah.
But at that time, they were grown men, 18, 19, 20, 21. And, it was definitely a good influence in my life. If I didn't have that, growing up outside of here, I don't know what I would have had to feel like a safe spot.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, but coming to Utah, that changed everything 100%.
Right.
So
Yeah. So your family, and it's always you and your sister, right?
that's it. That we got,
You
because
and your sister.
my mom had such complications. Like I said, she almost died giving birth to my sister. There was just no chance of it anymore. So it was just us two. And we're 5.5 years apart.
Okay. So you guys moved from Miami to Provo. Now the missionaries are on your doorstep every day. But yeah, and your dad, it sounds like he's working towards retirement. So he's not active duty anymore. Your family moves here where your mom already has family, and dad's family, Idaho's just, hop, skip, and a jump north.
Right.
What was that experience like?
It really changed our family dynamic. Because when we moved here, we didn't have a house, obviously. So we had to find a place to live. So what we did, we ended up moving in with my grandma and grandpa. To this day, they're probably the number one influence in my life during this time. They were the people I could look up to. They're both my heroes. Like, I knew no matter what, where I stood with grandma and grandpa, but I also knew if I upset them or disappointed them, I knew what was going to happen as well. Like, I knew how that affected them. I knew how it affected me. Really, so we got here, we moved in with grandma and grandpa for a while. We found a house. We literally moved 5 houses away from them. So we were at I was at grandma's house every day after school. So they were really my second parents. I learned so much from them during that time, and so thankful. Like, I honestly don't know if I would have made it if we wouldn't have lived that close to them. And that being said, my other cousin, who was my age, again, he's 6 months apart from me as well. So there's me, Shelly, and then Bill. We're all within 6 months of each other. He lived 3 houses down on the other side.
Wow.
So, really close. Yeah. And Shelly would be over all the time. They lived in Springville, which wasn't very far away, so we got to see each other a lot.
Right.
We moved into our house around the corner, and Dad is retired from full time. He's doing reserves, and the next thing I know, we're over at my grandma's house. We're sitting around the table. It's my mom, my grandma, my grandpa, and my dad, and me and my sister. And I remember them saying, we're getting a divorce. And just rocked my world. I didn't know what divorce was.
Right.
Hadn't been around anybody who had really talked about it. In the early 90s, it was still something that wasn't common.
Right.
Which in a way was good. But very, very looked upon in the church, in the LDS church, as something extremely bad.
Yeah.
And so I formed this opinion immediately when my mom says, I'm divorcing your dad. I immediately formed this opinion of, he's a bad person. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know the details. But because of how I was raised and the outlook on marriage is this sacred bond, which I don't disagree with. It is. But immediately he turned into the bad guy for absolutely no reason. And I don't know how else to describe it. It was like a switch turned on.
Right.
And so from that point, I viewed him as the bad guy.
Yeah. Do you remember, was there a lot of fighting? Was there a lot of, between your mom and dad before they announced their divorce? Do you remember them fighting or arguing or them being in love? Or what do you remember about their relation? And I mean, if you were, how old were you when they got divorced?
Well,
still really
I was young. I remember a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
I remember, we hadn't lived in our house very long. I don't remember the time frame, but I remember all of a sudden Dad was sleeping in the room next to me. He was sleeping in the office downstairs.
Right.
So I remember that. I remember yelling. I mean, just all the time. Like, it was constant. And again, I had formed this opinion on just the basis of, oh, well, this is a bad thing, and mom says that you're the problem, so you're a bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was that like to hear that they were getting a divorce? It sounds like immediately you're like, Dad is the bad guy. Because again, there is all kinds of messaging in the church of divorce. Yeah, it's not okay. It is bad. Right. And yeah, there is so much of that that's like, yeah, divorce sucks. It is horrible. It doesn't mean that that person's a bad person necessarily, but it does suck for everybody involved.
Might have to eat that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So so you're in promo, you're around the table, mom and dad are getting a divorce, and you're like, this means that dad is a bad guy.
Yeah. And really that's my point of view I had for him for years.
Mm-hmm.
Later on I found out, more of the backstory, different things that had happened. And, this is not the time or place to air any of that dirty laundry, but it gave me more of an understanding when I kind of figured out.
Right.
Like, dad was at fault and he had done things, but so was my mom.
Right.
Divorce is not a one person thing. It's a two people thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I really, and so he moved out, they got divorced. He lived in, student housing that was a men's housing. So my sister couldn't even go visit him.
Oh, wow.
And he refused to go anywhere else because he didn't want to spend the money.
Right.
And so I would go over and I could stay the night. And I remember sleeping in a dorm room essentially with 4 other guys.
Wow.
Like my dad had his own room, but me and him slept on bunk beds.
Wow.
And my sister could come over and we would do activities and stuff, but then she had to go because she couldn't stay there.
Wow.
And so I remember that very, very much that, well, you don't want to be a dad to both of us. It's kind of the feelings I had.
Right.
I know that wasn't his intentions at all.
Right.
But as a young kid, I'm forming these own opinions because of all the information I had. And so again, it started making him out to be more to that guy.
Right.
Just over situations that, really he didn't have a ton of control over.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So what was the custody situation? Was it dad on the weekends every once in a while? Was it half and half? What was it?
So we were, mom had full custody. It was like a 70-30 split. So we'd spend all weekdays, mom's house, every other weekend with dad, and then the holidays were split, and that was it.
Right.
So, we didn't have, my mom raised us.
Right.
My dad was around as much as he wanted to be. He started moving on and, doing different things, but he was there.
Mm-hmm.
We did miss weekends, and during the week, sometimes we'd go hang out. He didn't miss those days. He was there.
Right.
But it was just how it was set up. And again, a young kid, I just felt like he didn't want to be around us because I would only see him on the weekends. Like, I felt like he didn't fight for us.
Right.
But, again, we were here in Utah in the early 90s. And if you went through a divorce in Utah in the early 90s, the woman always got custody.
Yeah.
It was just how it was. It's changed a little bit here, but that was just how it was.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so it was not, again, really nothing that he did intentionally. It was just the court system. They said, no, you know what? You're the dad. You don't need to be there. You're the one that, that's the perception that the court system painted as well.
Right.
So again, all these outside influences are painting this picture about my dad, and I never gave him a fair shot because that was what was out there.
Right. Right. Yeah. So mom and dad get a divorce. You're going through this, 70-30 split with them. What else? Did you stay in Provo for the rest of your childhood? Pretty much?
So we stayed in that house for a few more years until I was a freshman.
Okay.
So I had made the basketball team, 7th, 8th grade, made the freshman team for Provo High. Mm-hmm. And Coach Drury was the coach there, and he's one of the all-time greats that ever coached at Provo High. And so I was super ecstatic to be part of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a freshman, but hey, I got to sit on the bench for some softball games. And I got to, I was there during the time of Kelly Wesley and a few of those who went on to play great basketball in college and, overseas. So, I was around some really amazing people, guys I looked up to a few years older than me. And in the middle of my freshman year, my mom came to me and said, we're moving again.
Wow.
I'd finally been in a place for 3-4 years.
Right.
And made some friends and really started to build my life, and we're moving. Right. And okay, I'm going to Provo High. Provo High was one of those schools at that time that was, a rival to everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted to be Provo basketball. They were the basketball high school, down here in Utah County, like it was them and Mountain View, were the two biggest, and everybody wanted to beat them. Mm-hmm. Well, I was playing on the sophomore team that year. Just to give you a background, my mom says we're moving to Payson, Utah.
Oh, wow.
To farmland. Like when we moved to Payson, we lived on 10 acres of farmland. Like we lived on a farm.
Right.
But before that, during my freshman year of basketball, not once, but twice, I got ejected out of both basketball games for fighting against what team? Payson.
So when you find out Payson, you're like, oh, heck no.
Oh, it was bad. And I remember just being so upset. Now the regret setting in. How could you do this to me? You're a teenager. I just finally had found some groove. I'd had my first girlfriend at this point. You're going to move me?
Right.
And so.
To farm country.
Yeah. Payson, that's where Footloose was fitting. Like, it was like, seriously. But again, so I was like, I don't want to move to Payson. I hate those guys. Like, I hate them. So that started a whole new path for me. I mean, so now I am just literally filled with regret, not just towards my dad, unintentionally, but now intentionally towards my mom. Yeah. She had remarried a very awful person.
Oh, okay. And that's what brought you guys to Provo, is she got remarried.
No,
to Payson.
Yeah, because he wanted land, he had horses. Okay. So they wanted to move somewhere he could have the horses and stuff, which it was super cool at first, right? Oh, horses, I get to be around them. Like any little kids want to be around horses. Mm-hmm. But I regretted it. And so now I'm forming this regret towards her, very intentional. You are wrecking my life. I mean, I'm a freshman in high school. I finally have friends. I have a girlfriend, and you're going to pull me away from all of this. Mm-hmm. And then I go, we move, do all that mess, and try out for the basketball team. I walked into tryouts, and the two guys I got in a fight with were standing right there. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you have got to be kidding me. Mm-hmm. And the coach literally walked over to me. He's like, don't even try. You don't have a chance. I will not put you on the team.
Wow.
And so at that point, it wrecked me, because that was kind of my life.
Right.
I mean, I was trying to be very athletic. I was really enjoying it. It came naturally to me, and I thought I had a good chance of playing my whole high school career, maybe a couple years of college. But at that point, I lost everything, and I held that against my mom for years. Mm-hmm. Is I lost my chance to play high school basketball because of you.
Right.
Because you moved me to this town where there was not a chance. Like, right. And the coach literally, he's like, no. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't blame him. I mean, getting in a fight with them, I mean, I can see where he was trying to protect the people on the team, but too, he didn't want a troublemaker on the team, because that's how he seen me.
Yeah. And you were a child.
Yes.
Who had been through a shit show.
Yes.
Who had been through so much, Yeah. And sports are so interesting too, right? There can be a lot of not great things that come out of sports, but something that does often come out of playing sports, especially in those like late elementary, early high school years, is it's a purpose. It's something that you have to, if you're going to be good, you have to commit time and energy, and you're going, and if your grades aren't good enough, you can't play. It's this purpose and this immunity. And it's such an important thing. And then to have that taken away from you, now there's this new guy in your life. And I hear you now say, he was not a good guy. What was kind of your experience of him during this time?
Oh, man. I broke his nose by throwing a basketball at his face. Mm. He was very, very self-absorbed. He came from a very wealthy family. Mm. His sister lived around the corner from Marie Osmond. in, over in the Palisades. And so, we always go over to their house and just blow away. They had a recording studio in their house. Like, it came from money.
Right.
And so it was a whole different lifestyle for us. And I hate to say it, but people live differently when they have money. Right. And, he just treated us all like crap. It was very awful, very awkward. Every experience we had in the house, I don't remember one good experience we had when he was there. So, yeah. So, kind of jumping through now, all this has happened. I've moved, I've been pacing a couple of years. I started becoming a very big troublemaker.
Right.
I started acting out, kids do. Started stealing my mom's car when I was 14 and 15 when she would go out of town. I stole her manual Nissan Sentra and taught myself how to drive it going down the hill very quickly. And I would have got away with it multiple times if I wouldn't have stepped on a used cigarette butt at the gas station and tracked it inside the car. She thought I was out there smoking in the car because she found that. But I had to confess because I didn't want to be known for smoking. Like, I did. So I told her I stole a car. So I started acting out. Me and my mom got in flat out drag out fights. I remember one, and I still to this day really regret this, but I remember my sister screaming and crying in the background because I literally picked my mom up and threw her over my head into the bathtub. Just because I was so angry at the world.
Right.
And I didn't know. I mean, I was 16, 15 at that time, I believe. I remember that. And it just is one of those experiences you will never forget. And you just have the sadness around it. I couldn't tell you what that fight was about today.
Right.
I honestly don't know.
Right.
But that's the path I was going down. I started acting out. I ran away from home multiple times. I actually started playing around with the suicide ideation at this time. Like, am I really worth being here?
Right.
There were multiple times where, now looking back, and this is how I'll describe it because I don't know how to describe how I was feeling then, but now looking back at the experience, I was telling people I was going to go kill myself. I was going to go jump off the school building so everybody could see my dead body. I was going to do a public suicide so people could see me. And now looking back, all I wanted to do is I wanted somebody to pay attention to me.
Right. To be seen.
I wanted to be seen. I remember standing on the roof of the high school with a couple guys that were not my friends because they wanted to see me do it. Like, oh, this kid's an idiot. This kid's crazy. We want to watch this. And I remember them standing up there, do it, do it, do it, jump.
Oh, wow.
And obviously I didn't. But it really was to the point of, I just wanted somebody to pay attention to me. I wasn't getting the attention.
Yeah.
So my dad wasn't around very much. Like I said, we moved to Payson. He moved to Orem at the time, I think maybe North Salt Lake. And he had got me remarried as well. And she was a sweet lady, but she was clinically crazy. She actually ended up in the mental hospital a few times. So it's just not a good situation.
Right.
So all around, I did not have a good family situation. My mom was married to a guy who was just awful.
Yeah.
My dad was married to a literal crazy person.
Right.
And there was just no stability. So again, I looked for stability to my grandma and grandpa.
Right.
Like, I would go to them when I needed a safe spot.
Right.
They were my people. I could go and talk to them. I could go hang out with them. They comforted me.
Right.
Like, they were the parental figures at that time that I really needed.
Right. Yeah. And when you look back, throughout your childhood and all of your life experiences and everything that you went through, what are sort of the messages that you remember taking away from that experience about mental health, how you handle mental health, what you're supposed to do about feelings, what were the mental health messages?
Again, my parents thought I was a troubled kid because I was acting out doing stuff, so they tried to get me into therapy. I will tell you to this day, I thought therapy was absolutely for the kooks. It was awful. I'm not going to go sit and talk to somebody because the therapist they took me to, they were awful. because they were through military insurance.
Right.
And I nothing against the military, but their resources are very limited. And just like if anybody's been to a dentist on the military base, oh boy, it's the same with the therapy. Like they're overworked. They're not, it is not their fault at all. But it was just an awful experience. Like they were telling me what a bad person I was.
Wow.
And how I needed to change my thoughts. Like, you're a horrible person. You should think these things. I remember the one saying, well, maybe you should get checked into the hospital. So I only did a few therapy sessions. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm not going to share my feelings.
Right.
Like, I'm better off just pushing these down. I don't want to share them. My dad doesn't share them. I don't know if I ever see my dad cry other than once or twice during the divorce. My grandpa, bless his heart, I don't really remember him crying, but I do remember him sharing his emotions. But he was still the tough grandpa. He was a paramedic, firefighter, construction worker his whole career. So he was a very blue collar, tough guy. So yeah, sharing emotions was non-existent.
Right.
And when I tried, I got told I was crazy.
Right.
And so I started suppressing.
Right.
My emotions were, nope, we don't show these. That's not what happens. My friends, we don't talk about emotions at school. You have to be the tough guy.
Right.
I started hanging out because I wasn't playing sports. So I wasn't hanging out with that crowd. So I started hanging out with the other crowd.
Right.
And so, yes, we don't talk about it. We're the tough guys. We're the bad kids. We do these things. We have the fast cars and we go out and do these things. So you definitely did talk about your emotions.
Right.
And so that was non-existent. Like, sharing your emotions was not a thing to do, not manly, not anything I had any desire to do at that time.
Right. Yeah. So as you, graduate high school and leave and sort of go out into quote unquote the adult world. Yeah. What was that experience like? What did your late teenage, early adulthood look like?
Well, it's funny. I've talked about this multiple times. Very different from everybody else's. I met my oldest girl's mom in high school. She went to Springville High as a drill team. I was all about the drill team girls and cheerleaders. And she paid attention to me. Like, I'd had a couple girlfriends up to this point, and fun, good relationships and learned some stuff. It was a lot of fun. But she was different. And I was 16. I had my own car, yes. My parents bought me a car. It burned down a week later after I bought it.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up wanting a nice car. I was into cars, that was my thing and still am. But so I saved a whole bunch of money and bought me a fun car to drive. And so I'd go back and forth and see her, and I was the kid with the fun car. My dad also had bought a brand new Camaro at that time, then he went to Germany for a year, and the Camaro sat at his house, and I stole it many, many, many times. While he was gone, I figured out how to break into the house and steal it. So I was driving a brand new Camaro to high school.
Right.
I was the cool kid. So she paid attention to me. We met when we were 16. We went to a handful of dances. And then things evolved. We ended up getting pregnant. I was 17 in my junior year. She was a senior. She was a year older than me. So she graduated high school in 98. And we got married in August of 99, right before I started my senior year.
Oh, wow.
And we moved into her parents' duplex, which we rented from them. We lived on one side of it. And I went to high school.
Wow.
Married with a kid.
Wow.
And working 2 jobs. After my first semester, I was a really good student. I got straight A's. I had a 4.0, 3.8 GPA through my whole high school career. It just came easy to me, so I would miss a lot of class. So when I was in my senior year, I already got all my credits too. We started because I got it was just my electives, just a few things I needed. So I finished my first semester of my senior year, going to 2 classes in the morning, then going to work, and then going home to do homework, and then going to work again. And then I had all my credits, and the teachers and the principal were really awesome. They worked with me. They knew my situation. They say, look, we're going to sign you out for work release. You don't have to come to school the rest of the year. You just need to have your employer fill this out every every semester, showing you were here, showing what you do, what you learned. And that's how I finished high school. Graduated. Everybody forced me to walk across. Had my baby girl there with me. Walking across, graduating high school. So that was my early teenage years. I grew up very, very fast.
Yeah.
And I was just working. And shortly after that, we got pregnant again. And so we had 2 baby girls, 15 months apart.
Wow.
And so by the time I was 19, I had 2 kids.
Holy cow.
And graduated, didn't know what I wanted to do with life. I love cars. And so I became an auto mechanic, went out, did the schooling, got certified, did all that kind of stuff. And I ran some shops and was a mechanic. And that's what I did for a handful of years. But again, my dad wasn't really around. Mom was not around as much because I felt she was disappointed in my decisions in life. Again, I went against what we were raised.
Right.
Like, you don't, do any of that stuff in the LDS church outside of being married and everything. That's why we ended up getting married, essentially, is because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
So that was really kind of that part of my life. I was forced into being a dad and an adult while I was here in high school.
Wow.
And so now I'm experiencing all these new feelings. I thought I knew what love was. I thought I knew what these things were. And I was just living, not sharing my emotions, not being a human. I was just focused. I had a family to take care of.
Right.
I didn't have time to be weak. I didn't have time to do things for me. I had to provide with them. And that's what I did. I went out, I worked hard, I paid all our bills, and I took care of the family. I did play hard, and, looking back, I did, some stupid stuff. But during that time, I was arrested for the very first time for street racing with both my daughters in the backseat and car seats.
Oh, wow.
Again, I was a stupid kid. I was just trying to have fun and live life. And it's the only time I ever got arrested. Only time I ever spent, hours in a jail cell. I think I was in there 6 to 8 hours before they came and got me out. My boss at the time, someone came to help me out.
Wow.
But I remember calling my friend Steve while the cops are sitting behind me in the car. And this was when cell phones were just new. So you only had a few minutes because it was so much money if you used your minutes. So I call him, I only have a couple minutes. I just got pulled over. They're taking me to jail. The kids are in the car. This is where I'm at. You need to come here right now and pick it up. And he was in high school still. He was a senior. We had met. He was a year younger than me. So I couldn't remember if he had graduated that time or if he was still just at the tail end of his senior year.
Right.
But he came over and called Shelly, because they, we knew each other, and they came and talked to girls because here I'm going to jail for street racing with girls in the car.
Wow. And how long were you in that marriage, in that relationship before that ended?
So we made it just a few years.
Okay.
And we were young and stupid. I want to say right after I turned 21 is when everything went south. And that's when my life really started to change.
Okay.
I had never had any taste of alcohol, nothing up until that time. I was clean, sober, trying to live the right life. I had taken nothing. I was 21. I will admit that from the time I was 17 on, I was an adult living out. I did get addicted to sex and pornography, and that was kind of the start of my downfall because that's, I was experimenting because I didn't have anything else to do.
Right.
So we got divorced just after I turned 21 due to me going out for the first time and having a drink. I will never forget that experience. That night changed everything. We went to a bar up on the east side, really high-end bar, like where the jazz players would go. There was Lamborghinis or Ferraris and stuff outside. We went up there to this bar to dance. Friends bought me a drink. My very first drink of alcohol was an AMF, which is one of the strongest, hardest liquor drinks you can get. And I was hooked from the first one. We left that bar, went to a party. And this should have told me this is an awful thing. But we went to this party up on the east side, big pool in the back. You know, I'm a 20-year-old kid, never experienced life. This was super cool. There was half naked women running around, jumping in the pool. There was drinks everywhere, just huge party. Cops got called. We were scattering like, you would do at that time. And the guy we were with hopped in the car, very intoxicated, took off down the street and ran over a cop.
Like a cop that was walking, hit their car. Oh my gosh.
He hit an officer that was there to break up the party, and he went up and over the windshield.
Oh my gosh.
And me and Steve, were out. We took off. Steve ended up running, I don't know, a couple miles down the road and passing out in the Smith's Deli chairs. And we ended up finding them hours later. But yes, that set everything in motion. Like, you would think my first experience with alcohol, going to a party like that, there was a girl that was raped at that party. I believe that's why the cops were called initially. She was running around. She was bleeding. I mean, it was an awful scene. And then this guy we were with runs over a cop while we were trying to do it.
Yeah.
So that really put a lot of things in motion and kind of took my life in a whole new direction at that point.
Yeah. Were you, sorry, maybe my brain, were you separated / divorced from your wife? Were you single at that time?
We were separated. That was kind of the start of it. After that happened, that was kind of the nail in the coffin. Like, I don't want to be married anymore. This was fun. I want to go experience life.
Right.
And she was kind of like, oh. And I do. I mean, I just forced kids. I made her grow up even faster because now she's a full-time mom, full-time.
Right. Yeah.
And I just went out and played as the dad. And I didn't know anything different. So, growing up with my girls, unfortunately, I had the same type of custody split that my mom and dad did, where I had them on the weekends and one night a week. I was always there. I was always available for him. But during their whole childhood, I was just out playing. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I let her take care of them.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, you're 21 years old, divorced with 2 kids.
Right. And never done anything with life.
Right.
So I was out partying hard. So, I mean, that really, for the next handful of years, that's just where life went. I was just out trying to experience things, and I didn't care what was going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine that must have been really hard. And like you're saying, your example of a father figure was you're not really there anyway.
Right.
Right. So not being around for your daughters in their early childhood was kind of normal.
It was what I did. And so, yeah, I thought I was doing my best. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to pause your story there? I wonder if this is part 1, right? Like childhood or, leaving, first marriage, children. We might kind of pause here.
Yeah.
And do part 2.
And then we'll do the last few years and how things have evolved.
Okay.
I think that's great. So, thank you for this first part. I mean, a lot of this stuff I haven't talked about with anybody. So this has been really good. And, I hope this is helpful to those who have listened so far. And, I'm excited to take the next step so everybody can kind of hear how everything's worked out and, the journey that we've been on for the last year to get us to this point today.
Yeah.
So
I am curious. I'll ask you one more therapy question and I'll let you go. But I am curious, and you brought this up a few times, right? Of like, oh, I mean, I was 11 or I was 16. And it is so interesting, right? When we're that age, when you're 4 and you're naked rollerblading around the neighborhood, you're in your 4-year-old brain, you don't think like, this is really dumb. You think this is freaking awesome, right? Or even, at 21, you don't think, this is really dumb and I'm going to regret some of these choices later. You think, I just want to live my life, right? And now with your, now you're 2025, Scott, you're looking back at all of these things. And so I'm curious, when you look at and tell this story of sort of this early experience, what is that like for you? What comes up? What do you notice telling this sort of first, half of your life?
I've had a lot of enlightenments as we've just had the discussion, because I've been able to look at it at a different view as I'm vocalizing it. I'm realizing some of these things. I guess the biggest part of that is saying that now I don't really hold those things against my dad, but I
Right.
did for so long.
Right.
And the same thing with my mom. I held those things against them. I didn't know how to express things, and that's what I knew. And so that's probably the biggest enlightenment for me sitting here thinking about it now is talking about these things. I've been able to process them as I vocalize them. That
Right.
I was wrong about how I think, but I didn't know any better.
Right.
And so I can't hold that against myself now, but I can't hold that against them either.
Mm.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing so far is how I view it. I've been able to change that view by remembering and talking about it.
Right. Yeah. You approach it with a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
And I think you hear that in your voice, in the last hour, how much compassion, you have towards your parents and these people in your life. And I think, there is that saying that what happened to you in your childhood or what happened to you during this experience is not your fault. You did deserve better. You needed someone to be there for you to do, you needed your dad there in a different way or your mom there or whatever it may be. It's not your fault, these things that happened, but it is your responsibility to take ownership over your life.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something, if you've ever, we've done a little bit of IFS, of internal family systems therapy, and part of recognizing when you're connected to self, they call it your capital S self. When I am connected to self, then it's these 8 C's come out, and it's compassion and curiosity and connectedness and all these things. And I think I really hear that in your voice now, that compassion and that connectedness and that curiosity and that huge sort of sign to me, and I hope to you too, of how connected to self you are in these past, few interactions that we've had together. We've, done a few things recently together. And I think that's something that I notice so differently now about you, is how connected you are to self. So I commend you for that and for being brave and telling that story and telling, this first half and part 2 to come.
I appreciate you taking the time to be here with me and help me share this, because you definitely bring some of that out. And just to finish off part 1 here, I will say just that self. There's a Jelly Roll song, and forgive me because I don't remember the name of it, but he talks about how you have to love that old self, because that old self is always part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's part of you. It's made you who you are. And again, my good friend Kurz Morley says, love that person you were, because you are now the person you are because of them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I've really tried to take that message to heart.
Right.
Especially over the last few weeks, I was really dove into some of the stuff and tried to make a difference.
Right.
So, thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, we'll have part 2 coming to you. I will see you then. Until then, make sure you share, follow, tell all your friends and family about it. We couldn't do this without any of your support. We're here because of you. We're here for you. So remember, survivinglifespickles.com. Follow us on the social platforms, and we will see you guys next time.